What is Red Mercury? It's time to get uncanny.
This Uncanny Earth is dedicated to the memory of Todd David Anderson.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 188 of This Uncanny Earth. We are creeping ever closer to that 200th episode and a pretty big surprise. So you're going to want to stay tuned, and you're also going to want to check out our YouTube channel. Head on over there.
Very important.
It doesn't have that many followers yet, so make sure you're over there following, because I want to be able to handle some business. So, follow the link to the YouTube channel. I can put that in the chat. And keep listening to the show. Go back, listen to our old episodes. Get yourself acquainted with who we are and what we do and what our shtick and spiel is. That sounds like a toy. I want my shtick and spiel. And we're going to keep on trucking. Tonight we're going to be talking about Red Mercury. So, you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for this conversation on This Uncanny Earth. But now, it's time for everybody's favorite part, except my co-host, who I'm slowly killing every day with these. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for dad jokes.
It's time for dad jokes. The cat may or may not be trying to tell you what his ideal joke would be. He's new and he doesn't know that he's supposed to be quiet during the show.
Ah, yes.
And there you go.
I guess he's not being perfect.
No, he certainly isn't.
Why did the attacking army use acid? To neutralize the enemy's base.
I don't know. I don't feel very strongly about that one.
That's okay.
I mean, I don't feel good about it, but I don't feel like... Because the first thing that came to mind when you first asked the one thing was because it's a pretty good digital audio workstation. Because that's what I use.
I know.
But it's not a musician's show, so it's not a musician joke. So we can't talk about that kind of thing, because then we'd have to,
then we'd
call
have to go
ourselves
start
something else.
That we would have to talk about, and then we'd have a bunch of what things.
We'd have to rebrand.
Do you think that that's like a think tank? What think?
I think there's a serious lack of thinking in that tank. That's what I think.
Oh, yes.
It's a serious lack of think tank.
You think so?
Yeesh.
Yeah, you might be right. You know what? I think you are right 100%. I think you are 100% right about that. So, tonight, we are talking about a very interesting substance, which I did not know about until literally, 2-3 days ago, if that. So this is brand new. This is something that is going to be brand new for this show. And I think that you guys will absolutely love it. And that is Red Mercury. Now, just to clarify, I was actually going to talk about something else this week. I was going to talk about why people love ancient Egypt so much, like that love affair that people have with ancient Egypt. We are still going to be doing that. All right, we are still going to do that. That's probably coming up next week, and I'm hoping to get some other input about and regarding something that we had talked about a couple weeks prior. There's somebody that I reached out to personally and sort of said, "Hey, do you want to be on the show?" And they said, "Well, I'll let you know in May, late May, this person." And it's going to be very, very awesome. Sadly, though, one person that never did get back to me, which still kind of makes me a little sad. I'm not mad at the person or upset with the person. However, I wish they would have reached out to us. And that is the niece of Zachariah Sitchin. I kind of wish that would have happened. But she's busy. I understand that.
We don't really know some of these people's lives, too. Like, I mean, we just see them as, oh, okay, you're the inheritor of your uncle's work and all this other stuff. But that doesn't mean that you're, like, knee-deep in the same stuff that he was doing. You've got your own career. You've got your other stuff. And this might just be, like, the very edge of what you do in a day, and you just don't got time to go on a little podcast.
She might not even be into it.
Yeah, that too. I mean, and some people are too polite, and they just don't want to be like, I really don't want to. Sorry. And it's instead of just like, well, I'll just check my schedule. Please don't email me back. Oh goodness.
And listen, I know that she was on that Night Dreams show, right? And maybe they just were like nonstop with it. I think I sent something about 6 months ago or more, and when she didn't respond, I was like, okay. And that's not a slight to her by any means. I hope she's doing very well, mind you. But she probably gets just swamped with people. Hey, can I want to be on the show? You got to be on the show. Do you want to do this article? Do you want to write this book? Blah, blah, blah. And if she's not into it, I feel bad for her. And so, like I said, I'm not upset with her. I would have enjoyed having her on. Obviously, I would have definitely enjoyed having her on. But it's not something that I'm ever going to be upset about. So, and I appreciate her reaching out to us and getting back to me. If anything, I do 100% appreciate that. So, it is what it is.
And just a quick note to that.
Yes,
for future reference, anybody else out there who might be listening, who we might have reached out to be a guest, or we might reach out to in the future to be a guest. And if you're just not into that kind of thing, like you're not into podcasts and you're not into being interviewed and stuff, just be like, hey guys, I'm just not into that. It's cool. We're adults. We're not gonna be like, they said they didn't want to be on my show.
I'm not gonna trash on the next stream over.
It's cool. I mean, you can be honest and just be like, I don't really like that kind of thing. I was on a couple of those things before, and I really didn't care for it. It's not a big deal, and that might have happened. Who knows? Maybe they were on the other show, and maybe they decided after that she just wasn't really into that kind of format. And so we're not going to be, if you guys don't want to be on the show, if we ask, just be honest and say, hey, this is why, and we'll be like, all right, cool.
Yeah, no worries. I reached out to, what was his name? I'm drawing a blank right now, and I shouldn't. The Bigfoot, the Gimlin, Bob Gimlin. I saw him in person at, oh man, I forget the name of that. It was in Cambridge. I don't think
Creature Weekend.
Creature Weekend. Thank you. Just having a blank day. Creature Weekend. And I threw my business card. I said, are you interested? He said, no, not really. I said, that's fine. I'm going to ask. And if you say no, that's fine. Like, we're adults. I'm never going to be upset about that you didn't want to be on the show. If you don't want to be on the show, that's fine. Like, I'm not one of those hosts that'll have somebody on and then make them feel terrible the entire show. And there is a person out there who has done that. So, what think? Anyways, back to tonight's topic. Something that I find very fascinating. And I have only known about it for like three days at most. And that is Red Mercury. Now, what is Red Mercury, you say? Well, it's a supposed substance of unknown composition that is used in the creation of nuclear weapons. That's not all it's used for, by the way. That's just the big thing that it's used for. Now, according to Samuel Cohen, in his book, The Nuclear Threat That Doesn't Exist, or Does It? He goes on to quote, or say, and I quote, "This is very hard to do using conventional explosives because of the precise control over the imploding shockwave that is needed. In the case of red mercury pure fusion, it is the burn of the red mercury, not a shockwave, that creates the needed temperature and pressure. Another article that I happened to stumble upon stated that it also allows for more death through radiation, but less structural damage. Think neutron bomb. That's the best way that I can explain that. It'll still kill people, but it won't destroy as many structures as, say, a nuclear bomb will do. Because nuclear bombs will pretty much destroy everything in their path. Neutron bombs don't do that. So, just something I found fascinating.
Difference
What
in
did you
kinetic
find?
force.
Yes. What did you find when you first looked this up?
To be honest, there's not a lot out there. A lot of it kind of runs over itself. Like, there's a lot of repeats, and a lot of the similar articles are all cited back and forth. So it's kind of difficult to track down anything really that really different than what you can find on, like, say, going straight to Wikipedia. I mean, you go there first, you look at that, okay, this is the basics, and then you take a look around, and there really isn't too much that says anything different. I did check some of the citations on Wikipedia, one of which was a New Scientist, and they have a website that this article is from '95, where they talk about that it is very dangerous. They talk about Sam Cohen and Frank Barnaby, and
there's a couple other scientists too that sort of co-sign the whole Red Mercury substance.
Mm-hmm. But there's not a lot of other things out there. Most of what you find again is repressed from not repressed, but like
redone.
Yeah, it's the same thing from a bunch of... Most of the modern sources are all that same way, so you have to go back in time a little bit. And the farther back you go, it's difficult to find that kind of thing because there was no internet, so you have to rely on people who archived different things and then put them on the internet. What's interesting is a name that we're going to talk about probably a lot tonight is Mr. Sam Cohen. Because he's where most of this information came from, and he supposedly worked on the Manhattan Project, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he worked on the Manhattan Project in the 40s, and he was a nuclear weapons advisor to the U.S. government with the Rand Corporation for 20 years. And he said, quote, "Red Mercury is real and it is terrifying. I think it is part of a terrorist weapon that potentially spells the end of organized society." And he claimed that it could be used to make a baseball... As far as late as 1995, he claimed this. He claims that it could be used to make a baseball-sized neutron bomb capable of killing everyone within about 600 meters of the explosion. So
what is that? What is that in miles? Do you know? I can.
600 meters. I don't think that's even like a full mile necessarily.
Here, let me do this. Let me look it up. You continue to talk, so we don't have dead air. And then I'll get back to you.
But it's a pretty big range. I think that the fear here was that
0.37 miles, so not even a full mile, not even a half a mile.
It's for like pinpoint attacks, like for particular things. And one of the dangers of something like this, when we talk about neutron bombs, as you mentioned, they're not as damaging to infrastructure because they don't use kinetic force so much.
Yep.
Most bombs that we know of, they use kinetic force when they explode, and the kinetic force pushes things all out and causes a lot of the damage. That's why things like meteors and asteroids are so much of a danger here on the planet, because they hit with such kinetic force that it equals the same thing as a nuclear bomb. A nuclear bomb basically can reproduce that kind of kinetic force. And a neutron bomb and other kind of things that they've worked on, and we know that they've worked on things like this multiple times. It's you hear a lot about, you can get nuclear bombs the size of a suitcase in terrorist countries, supposedly. And
I don't know if I'd want the old nuclear suitcase bomb. That sounds like a recipe for self-explosion.
The thing for those is that those are kind of referenced like the dirty bomb that you hear a lot about. Dirty bombs are bombs that are very heavily... They rely heavily on radiation as their prime killer. Radiation. And a cleaner atomic bomb is going to cause more kinetic damage than it is going to cause... It's just going to be a really huge, massive explosion. But people who want to go after people and not infrastructure, That's where you get the neutron bombs and things. And that's why he claimed to be so worried about this stuff. And so it's super interesting that he's kind of the center of all this stuff, but there's no other real big information, and there could be a few different reasons for that. And I'll let you launch into that there.
So a couple other reasons why red mercury is supposedly a very dangerous thing are more on the supernatural aspect of things and less on the chemical neutron bomb explosion things. Now, in the 1940s, we have Egyptian archaeologist Zaki Said Ali. He discovers a red viscous liquid that's hidden beneath the sarcophagus of the mummified remains of the pharaoh Amun-Tefnakht. And he was a pharaoh during the 24th dynasty from 732 to 725 BC. It was said that some of this liquid is actually held in a museum in Luxor, Egypt, and that a classified paper in 1968 states that this red substance, or the red mercury, had a density of 23 grams. For those of you that aren't in the know, when they talk of nuclear weapons, they a lot of times use grams as the measurement for uranium, plutonium, things like that, a dense chemical compound. But this anomaly was superior because it only had a density of, or it was superior to pure plutonium because it had a higher density than pure plutonium. Pure plutonium only has 20 grams. Of course, the media would go on to deny that the substance was red mercury. Instead, they said it was embalming fluid. Now, I wonder, there was an article, this was when the virus was going around and it was just, everybody thought the world was going to heck. And I remember they found that black liquid in that sarcophagus. I don't remember this. People wanted to drink it. They wanted to drink the liquid. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah, because supposedly it had broken and it had...
What if that black liquid mixed with water and that was red mercury? Now that I think about that. Obviously it probably isn't, but there's a reason for that, and I'm going to go on to that now. There are witch doctors who state that the attributes are very real and that the jinn, now we had an episode on jinns a while back, and I would definitely recommend you guys go listen to that. It's a fantastic episode. I'm still learning about jinn myself. But they claim that red mercury can provide both human beings and jinn with immortality. It is also said that this could be found in the throats of many mummies, hence why I wonder if that substance that had leaked out of that sarcophagus was in fact red mercury that had mixed with dirt, whatever was in the sarcophagus, water, all that.
There was like bones and organic stuff in the coffin. Like there had been somebody in that, so somebody over time rotted away in there, and there's rotten bits of stuff in there.
Yes, 100%.
And people
I don't know how mummies decompose, so I don't know if they turn into a liquid or if they stay that solid state. Like if there's any form of liquid involved, but maybe that red mercury is what did it. We don't know. It's conjecture. I don't know I obviously can't get to Egypt to examine the forbidden drink, as it were. But that's fine. It's fine. Somebody fly me out on a plane. So what happens now is it propels the tomb raiding in Egypt. These same witch doctors go also on to say that one who possesses red mercury and uses it in spells and incantations and divinations can talk with the jinn, and that the jinn will grant them immense wealth. However, these aren't just regular jinn, which is something else I just learned. So this is some more like knowledge holes to go down at some point that we'll have to get into. But more summon the 11 jinn kings. The 11 Jinn Kings are immense-sized creatures on a scale that could be comparable with mythological creatures, the Hydra, Leviathan, Lovecraftian creatures like Cthulhu, those kind of beings. Now, another alchemical substance that is said to be created from red mercury is that of the Philosopher's Stone. It is said that you can use red mercury with magic in order to create it. That would explain some things. However, I don't remember red mercury being talked about much when reviewing for the Philosopher's Stone. We also have an episode about that too. Mm-hmm. I think it was an alchemy episode as a whole. I don't think it was just about the Philosopher's Stone, but you go back and check that out too. We almost have an episode for everything at this point. Ex-magician turned Islamic practitioner Hassim Adam has gone to state that red mercury is nourishment for the jinn. However, the jinn can acquire it by themselves, and they actually need human interaction with it in order for it to benefit the jinn. Interesting enough. So I'm not going to do this, mind you. I want to make sure that I clarify that statement for anybody listening. I was looking up ways to summon a jinn, like how you would go about doing it. I'm not going to do it. I know there's people out there just shaking their head like, no, don't do that. Don't. But I found it to be fascinating. Then I stumbled upon this red mercury idea. And I thought to myself, I wonder what they truly need it for. And it reminds me of something. It reminds me of the ancient astronaut theory and the Anunnaki who had humans digging for gold on the planet. What do these jinn, obviously immortality, but we don't understand the jinn nor the jinn dimension. So what is this red mercury for? Now, something we have to understand about jinn, a lot of people will point to Islam as as the beginning of the jinn. However, pre-Islamic folklore states that the jinn existed before Islam, and then Islam sort of incorporated the jinn into their belief system. Because oddly enough, with the exception of Kevin Paul's book, I haven't heard of jinn sightings in the United States. Now, is that to say that I know all there was to know about jinn sightings in the United States? No. But I haven't run across anything that specifically points out there is jinn in the United States. So that leads me to believe, why are they only located in the Middle East? Add to that the red mercury anomaly, and you have to wonder, is this sort of Anunnaki ancient astronaut theory similarity in that they are having people go out and find red mercury, but it only exists in the Middle East? It doesn't exist out here. Because I don't know too many folklore out here that talks about any form of a substance. A lot of our folklore is based around ghosts, Native American stuff, and I don't think they had red mercury. But there's something about that area of the world. And what if that's what we're looking for? What if that's why we have soldiers everywhere over in the Middle East? We have very few soldiers looking for stuff that we know of, mind you. I'm sure there could be some black ops stuff that we have no idea about, some off-the-books things that they're going and looking for. But it seems like there's so much conflict in the Middle East, and I would be hard-pressed to believe that it's just because of Islam and the state of Israel having a fight. I feel like there's something there, and what if red mercury is that something that we're trying to find? And that's why Egypt itself, because as me and my co-host have talked before, the archaeological aspect of Egypt has always been a very tight-lipped, very closed-off idea. It's always been, we're not going to let you come in here and look around. You can tour the area, guided tours. We're not just going to let you, run free. And maybe that's in large part due to the tomb raiding, or maybe it's in large part to whatever this is. because people have that love affair, which we'll talk about next week, with Egypt. Unlike any other civilization on the planet, Greece and Rome combined, even though Rome was really just Greece 2.0 electric boogaloo, to be honest. But they have a love affair with Egypt that they don't have with anywhere else. I mean, there are shows that reference Egyptian iconography more than Greece or Rome or any other civilization. So this Red Mercury that's just free-flowing, and why is it only in the Middle East? And another thing that I want to point out too is that what is the cube called that they go to every year? That
on
Muslim,
the Hajj,
what is that
the
called?
Hajj is the pilgrimage, and
The cube has a specific name to it.
the
It's not the Kaaba, is it? Is
I
it the
think
Kaaba?
it's the Kaaba. Yeah, pretty sure.
I am going to use my computer to find out. Yeah, the Kaaba. That's supposedly a meteor or something of that nature
Meteorite.
that crashed to Earth, and I'm not as well versed in what it is, mind you. What if that also has something to do with Red Mercury? Now, it's what is in that building is probably something important, and I'm trying to figure it out what it is. Yeah, the black stone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something from space. So what if that also contained Red Mercury? You know, these things are, and it's weird because that is that area, the Middle East, is home to so many mysteries, you know. Red Mercury, Iran, the pyramids, what they were built for, and so much more. Like, our history is just stacked with mysteries over there. So to me, it just seems very odd that we are just so occupied with the Middle East. And I think this is just another layer of that sort of says, okay, you know what, that's a little secret over here, and that sort of thing. You know, I don't know. I just think it's very fascinating to point out. I don't know. What do you think?
I've got some interesting thoughts in as I was reading some things here and listening to you talk about the Middle East and the jinn and things. I came across. I'm kind of putting something together in my head here, so bear with me because this might be a little bit silly. Maybe it won't. One of the things first, I'm going to fast forward to the modern age where Frank Barnaby, the other scientist with Cohen, who believes in the Red Mercury and everything, and that it's being used for atomic weapons. Now, he said, after talking to 4 unnamed Russian scientists, unnamed always gets kind of like, okay, well, who knows, but they provided information, according to him, and he says that he concluded that that Red Mercury is a polymer with a gel-like consistency in which mercury and antimony have been bound together after irradiation for up to 20 days in a nuclear reactor. Now, mercury in some areas of the world is relatively easy to get a hold of. Regular mercury, not the Red Mercury, just regular mercury. The Forbidden City in China has those rivers of mercury, okay? And so I got to thinking, while we're having this discussion here, well, nobody really knows why they have that there. I mean, the assumption is there's a connection with Mercury, with the gods, and with space, because it's silver, like the moon, and things like that, and it has a connection to that kind of thing already. So this can further say, well, maybe there's another reason why they really needed it, because they needed to mix it and to irradiate it. Let's say, if you could find it naturally in places like the Middle East, how would you find it already irradiated? Well, we've talked about on the show recently, actually, even within the last few weeks, about places that were potentially in the distant past irradiated with atomic weaponry, like in India, like in some of the deserts in the Middle East. because they find sand that's been blasted into glass by a great force. So what if something like that happened in the past and created this stuff already there, and then it's been buried in the sand, right? Which kind of adds to your theory there, that they could get it there. Nothing like that has happened here on this part of the world, so you can't get it here. You'd have to make it, right? But what if it had formed almost naturally in places there? And what if they knew about it in Asia, which is why they stockpiled so much regular mercury in places like the Forbidden City, specifically for royal people who were supposed to be descended from the gods? Interesting stuff. Super interesting stuff.
So maybe Red Mercury is a byproduct of nuclear fusion or fission and mercury.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you have to irradiate it. Well, I wouldn't say fusion or fission because that's the bomb itself, but like you have to irradiate it somehow to turn it into Red Mercury.
And it says here that he figured it had to be irradiated for up to 20 days in a reactor. But again, we don't know what the conditions were at the time. So if the stuff exists and if you could find it in natural pockets, different places, then that could also be evidence of nuclear things that have happened in the past. And they had to have been pretty bad. Like to have an area remain irradiated for up to 20 days is a pretty substantial atomic attack. And we don't have a lot of parallels to that in the world, but we do have. We had the Chernobyl disaster, of course, which wasn't from an atomic bomb, but similar overall circumstances. You had Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I don't know off the top of your head, do you know how long it took them before they were able to move back into those areas before the radiation was low enough?
I want to say 10 years, I think. I could be wrong on that, but I think like
so
20
days might be nothing. You know, I mean, actually, now that I think about it, the meltdown in Fukushima is still, like, they've allowed people to start moving into some of those areas, and most people didn't, because you can go there and you can still find lethal pockets of radiation. But some people moved back. They're like, this is our home. This is where we live. And they live there with it. They live there with the radiation. And that brings an interesting perspective. Because 20 days is almost like nothing as far as time span.
I looked this up. In 1945, few people understood the connection between radiation poisoning and nuclear weapons and power. So by the mid-1950s, Hiroshima's population had returned to its pre-war level. As for the health effects, the Fat Man Little Boy devices were quite crude, low yield, by today's standards, and they were air detonations, which meant they didn't kick up a lot of radioactive material. And while there were a lot of cases of health problems from the aftermath of the bombings, it was actually a relatively low amount compared to the number of people exposed. So you didn't have it sitting. You had it. You had the people affected that were in the blast or in the blast radius, so they got it. But there wasn't. It looks here like there wasn't enough nuclear or radioactive particles strewn about on everything.
Add in being an airburst.
Yes.
And it was already high up. Yeah.
Yes.
So compare that to something else that might have been on the ground. Like if it was something like something hot enough to make the sand of a desert into glass, it might have actually hit lower. Or in even Mesopotamia, even if we're talking about the evil wind, quote unquote, that I talked about from Samaria legend a week or two ago, as possible radiation fallout. So interesting stuff. I mean, this is all theory, and I just pulled all of this out of the air just in the last 20 minutes. I just came up with this, so I'm sure there's a lot of holes in there. But it's an interesting direction to go, and I think it kind of helps. It adds some details into how they could probably find some of this stuff. And you might be right. It might be there under the sand, at least in limited quantities, and that's why there's so much fighting over there, because the people at the top know it's there. But for everybody at the bottom, it's about ideology, or it's about freedom, or it's about this, or it's about that, and we're out fighting for all this other stuff. Meanwhile, we want to occupy these places to get this stuff.
Yes. Because in reality, that's just one of the many mysteries that sit in that area. Because I've always found it fascinating that we have troops there, and a lot of people say, well, it's for the oil. I don't necessarily believe that. There could be some to that.
Oil is like the scapegoat for everything these days, I think.
That's
like,
what I think.
It's almost always, if there's fighting somewhere in the world, oh, it's for the oil. If there's some new conflict somewhere, it's for the oil. It's just an excuse, I think, and this is getting into probably stuff that's off the topic of the show, but it's getting into ways to manipulate the global market, honestly. But again,
sense.
that's way off the number here. Where it's
way off.
Something.
Way
but
off. We're way off the mark.
Still, I mean, it's stuff like that would be a cover for something else that might be more valuable, something else you might be looking for.
And it's a good cover because then you get the population riled up. They're not nobody. I don't know anybody outside of me and you personally. And I don't think you had heard of this until I told you the other day, which I'm not slighting you. Like,
no, I honestly, I didn't know anything about it. Like, when you first asked me about it, I was like, yeah. I was completely.
And there's not too many things. There's not too many things you and I don't at least know a scrap or hear a scrap of information from regarding things like this. So when you were like, what? I was like, what? And then we were like, what? And now here we are. Something that I found to be interesting, and I don't know if you had stumbled upon this, but I did. In 2009, Saudi police, according to the Saudi Gazette, investigated a hoax that had people believing that old Singer sewing machines contained red mercury. The article went on to say that some buyers are willing to pay up to $50,000 for these machines. 200,000 riyals in Saudi Arabia, their currency. Now, the way you could figure this out, it was said you could take your mobile phone and hold it up to the needle of the sewing machine. If there was red mercury in the sewing machine, you would lose signal, which, it interferes. So if that's the case, it interferes with signal. We can get to that. We can talk to that in a second.
There's other things.
Right. No, exactly. It was also said that the hoax originated with a German national who traveled to Jordan, claiming to be a treasure hunter who claimed to have discovered large stashes of ancient Roman gold worth billions, and that he needed equipment and red mercury to remove it. The German said that the easiest way to acquire the substance was by extracting it from those sewing machines. Now, here's the funny part. Here's where it gets kind of hilarious. It was found that all owners of these machines were directly related to the German. So what I believe happened is he took these machines, or he got his buddies together and said, we can make a lot of money doing this. Because let's make it in the oddest of things, right? I'm sure nobody took the sewing machine apart. And if they did, they probably thought, they probably just mixed it in with the needle. Like, it's probably in the needle itself. They just, mixed it together. And he probably said, listen, let's do sewing machines. I don't know anybody that's going to take it apart or have it sent to a lab to analyze it. Get enough people, boom. Another thing I connected to is, if that's the case, let's entertain this shenanigans, and let's say it's true, right? Not the sewing machine part, but that he needs red mercury to get the treasure. The only thing you need that for is to pay the jinn to get the treasure from the jinn. Because jinn use it somehow to make themselves immortal. Which reminds me, I just thought of this. Which reminds me of the golden apples. Which reminds me of manna. Which reminds me of all these other substances that throughout mythology, beings, humans, have all eaten to sustain their immortality. It's in Chinese mythology. It's in Greek mythology. It's in the Old Testament. So it's all of these things, and this is just another thing. And what do the jinn use red mercury for? If it makes them immortal, and if we are to believe that jinn are like us, that they have babies and that they get married and they have a civilization, maybe, they're interdimensional beings, then is this something they use in their medical machinery? Because I believe we use mercury in ours.
Yeah.
Like in our thermostats.
We use regular
mercury. Or not
thermostats,
thermometers. Right, in our thermometers.
Yeah.
What if it's the same concept in that dimension, but they have to use red mercury instead of regular mercury in order to keep their people alive? And it's not something they just drink or they take, but it's like we need it, say, Gen A needs a kidney transplant, but the dialysis machine needs red mercury in order for him to receive said kidney transplant in order for them to live. So when they say immortality, they just mean that it prolongs life long enough to make people think it's immortal. We live, 100, 120 years at best, if you're lucky with that 120, if you're lucky to be 100. So say that 100 years, but Jinn live maybe longer than that. But we don't know. We think immortal because we don't have a sense of that dimension. We only have the sense of our dimension.
And that's an interesting point. And it's something that people don't like to think about. It makes people kind of uncomfortable when you think about immortality, in that a lot of the legends regarding immortality are, like you've said, it requires you need something to activate it or to kind of keep it going. So immortality that requires something to sustain it isn't immortality when it runs out. Which is a really important point, and it's a really interesting point, and it kind of puts a lot of perspective on a lot of some of these legends of creatures and of beings and things, and why they need things from us, because we like to, throughout our history, like in our when we're asking whether gods exist and things in our episode, what was that, 2 weeks ago, I think?
Yes. No, that was like 3 weeks ago, I think.
3 weeks.
I don't remember. It's been, I can look that up. But go ahead, continue. I'll figure it out.
You have to wonder what makes something godlike, and it could be something as simple as this. They have something that they take that keeps them alive, that makes them seem larger than life, but when they don't have it, then they're like us or even lesser than us. And that's a really interesting point, and it makes people uncomfortable. And it's just something to consider. I don't know why that seemed relevant, but it's just really interesting to me. And this whole Red Mercury thing, I don't know. I'm stuck on it. Like I don't know. I keep feeling like there's like it's bogus. But I look at the people involved in it, and they seem relatively credible, and I don't see what they have to gain about talking about it. But then, for the most part, most of them also, they haven't been erased, they haven't been disappeared, they haven't been, they may have, they still kind of work in the field, not directly. They're all, retired and things like that, some of the older ones, but they all seem to, they're able to give us this information with impunity, it seems like.
Well, if you make it seem like it doesn't exist, what is there to worry about? Unless they have a physical copy or a physical piece of Red Mercury, all you do is just make them look like kooks. You don't even have to kill them. You don't have to do anything to them.
Yeah.
You just make them look like raving lunatics. What's the point in? Because if you say somebody goes on those tears, right, and there's a bunch of people that say Red Mercury, and then you kill those people off, there's a chance, albeit even if you silence everybody who's done it, there's a chance that that's going to get out. But if you just say to that person, you're a wacko, and that's all I'm going to say about it is you're a wacko, I'll pay 15 people of different nationalities, different walks of life to say you're a wacko, boom. You just ruin their credibility. You don't got to kill them. You don't got to get rid of them.
Yeah.
Ruin their credibility. Yeah, that shuts them down. Now, here's something. This is, and like you, at first I thought this seems really fake. But here's where things get a little interesting. In 1968, the DuPont company, now they have been known for some chemical spills. I believe there was one in West Virginia regarding the DuPont company. But after hearing about the experiments performed on Amun Tefnacht, they published a report regarding Red Mercury. Now, in 1992, the UK Sunday Times got access to this report, and it was stated that DuPont had synthesized a powerful chemical with the exact same properties as Red Mercury, and that this chemical is known. I couldn't find it right away. I didn't have that much time to look it up. It's out there. It's the chemical itself, the symbol, whatever, is out there. People can, you can look it up. It has also been said that another chemical company went on to replicate this same chemical. Now, here's a little something that I put together. This might not be true, and I'm going to Google this company because I want to make sure I get this right, because I don't think I will. It's a famous chemical company.
Is this the one in Germany?
Yes, you
Thor.
knew.
The Thor Chemical Company.
No, there's another one too, FG Farben. It's the same one that did the Nazi experiments, I think. I think it's Farben. I could be wrong. But like Bayer, there's another one. Which, and I think it's hilarious that you said German, because I was going back to that German person. Maybe somehow there's a connection that I'm not getting between that. But I think it's Farben. I want to say it is, but I could be wrong. I could be 100% just not stating it right. But yeah, I thought to myself, could it be that company did it? Let me make sure I got this right, because I found it. Yeah, IG Farben, not FG. IG Farben, and they are let me see here. It's a German chemical and once again, it's a German chemical and pharmaceutical conglomerate formed in 1925 from a merger of 6 chemical companies: BASF, which I think used to produce cassette tapes, Bayer, Hoechst, and Agfa, Chemisk Fabrik Gersheim Electron, and Chemisk Fabrik Vorm. It was seized by the Allies after World War II and then divided back into its constituent companies. So there you go. A little bit of connection on this Uncanny Earth, not in the scheme of things. I just think that's kind of interesting. Here's some dude from Germany. And once again, it could have nothing to do with it. The two could be as far apart as possible.
Well, saying that, the company that I have here is from 1990, which could be a derivative of one of those earlier companies. It's a British-owned chemical company at Speyer near Mannheim in Germany, called Thor Chemical Company. And being British-owned, if the original companies were all divvied up by the Allies after the war, then that would make sense. And supposedly, they have documents, or they had at the time, that that they received a, and this was leaked to Greenpeace apparently, that there's chemical specifications for a substance called Red Mercury 2020, which is a compound of pure mercury and mercury antimony oxide, Hg2sp2O7, if anybody wants to know the chemical thing. So you can make your own at home now. There you go. Described as cherry red and semi-liquid, and the documents were part of a request from an unknown buyer for the supply of 4 to 10 flasks per month. Which is interesting. And the person who was the sales director, or I don't know, not necessarily the sales director, but the person in charge of those requests, their location didn't deal directly with mercury, and he didn't think much of it. He just saw the word mercury. He didn't think about red mercury, and so he passed it on to a sister company that was part of their chain to complete, but no one really knows if it was actually completed or if anything ever happened after that. So interesting. Like, there's little bits and pieces here that seem to be kind of connected, but nothing that's like a full chain. There's like a link here and a link here and a link here, and nothing fully connects together.
And that's what this whole thing has seemed to be, nothing but. And I got something else too. So this all starts from Soviet scientists. This whole Red Mercury thing. It's reported that the compound from DuPont was used by Soviet scientists and turned into a compact explosive. Now, this explosive could apparently kill thousands of people via radiation, but like I said at the start, not cause the same amount of structural damage that a normal explosive would. Now, this was developed during the Cold War. It is said that it weighed less than 100 pounds, and that allegedly, Red Mercury could be made similar to the neutron bomb, and it would be virtually undetectable. Now, obviously, whether the Russians did use Red Mercury to create mini neutron bombs isn't known, but after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, a substance was being sold on the black market that was claimed to be Red Mercury. In Moscow, one chemical company openly offered Red Mercury for sale. So, we keep pulling at threads of Red Mercury, and the more you pull, the more odd it gets. It's on this weird cusp of being fake, but at the same time being an actual thing. I mean, the Singer sewing machines, okay, maybe there was like a little hoax there involved with that. But then you have the supernatural aspect where that magician, he was an ex-magician, Hassam Adam, was like, hey, I used to, dabble in Red Mercury. He talks about it, dabbling in Red Mercury, and then you would give it to Jinn, and they would make you wealthy. Whether they would instantly bring you the gold or money or whatever, or whether they would take you there, but it said they could just give it to you. And to me, I was like, okay. And then you have on the other side, we're making nuclear bomb, we're making neutron-style bombs with it. Mm-hmm. What's going on here? Is it because when we just talk about regular mercury, it has been said that regular mercury was used with the Foo Fighters and with a lot of Nazi science fiction-esque ships. Like it was said that it powered that ship, and that mercury was used in an ancient astronaut
the
theory
Bell,
ship.
I think. The Bell was one of them that supposedly, supposedly used a lot of mercury or something like that.
So here's all this, and then Red Mercury, and it's just like, okay, maybe Red Mercury is the Jinn equivalent to our Mercury. That maybe that's how they fly things. Maybe like Vimanas that used Mercury, they use Red Mercury because their world they need that. But in our world, we need regular Mercury, and Red Mercury can only be made by irradiating Mercury, and then you get into this whole thing, and then next thing you know, your brain's mush because you've thought too much.
What's interesting,
that's that.
Is that I'm going to look up the conversion here real quick.
Please. Conversion song. I'm singing this, so you should sing.
Supposedly, Russia is able to manufacture 60 kilograms of this stuff a year as of 1995, according to the article from New Scientist, which is about 133 pounds of the stuff, which doesn't seem like very much to me. And the 1995 from the 1960s, if they've been able to produce it since the 1960s, they've only been able to manage to boost it up to being able to making 133 pounds of it a year.
Right.
Either it's extremely difficult to make, or it's extremely expensive to make, or it's extremely dangerous to make, or any combination of those things. And if they had it, I would think that they, like, in that amount, to make anything really worth using as some kind of, like, a mass-produced, like, you can make nukes faster and easier than that these days. And I say that like you can just go to Walmart and take one off the shelf. But no, I mean, like, North Korea's pounding out nukes as far as we know. Russia has a huge stockpile. We've got a bunch. There's other countries we know of that have a bunch of them. And everybody's just sitting on piles and piles and piles of them. There's, like, enough to destroy our planet several times over. And still have extra. So to make these other things with this small amount, it seems like I don't think that they would use it for nukes. I think they would use it for something else. But then again, what else out there in the world is something big and powerful and mysterious that people are using things for right now? Like Russia, even before all this stuff that came up now, and I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into the current whatever. I'm just going to say that their economy was not in the best shape beforehand.
Right.
And you would think with manufacturing this stuff for so long, they'd have a use for it. They would have done something to elevate their country.
Maybe the synthetic compound is unstable.
It could be that too. I mean, maybe...
And that the original Red Mercury itself is hard to come by. So something that's hard to come by, if you try to synthesize it, maybe they did synthesize it, right? But maybe it's such an unstable thing that carrying it, moving it wrong, blows it up. And maybe they can't synthesize it to that level. And so it's so unstable that all they did is just, we synthesized it. We can't do anything with it, but we synthesized it. And it's not in abundance. Maybe Red Mercury is something that, if not used in a combination of mercury and irradiation, is an off-world substance that's so rare that it only came to Earth for a little while. Or maybe it was destroyed. Maybe it was something that was here in abundance in that area and then was used up. Maybe in the War of the Gods that we had talked about with India and that whole thing. Maybe that was our Lost Tech episode.
They could have brought it with them here, and then maybe during the resulting War of the Gods that happened in parts of the world, maybe the stockhouses got destroyed because somebody thought, hey, what better way to battle my opponent than to remove something that they need, but it went out of control and they took out everybody's. And maybe that's why they all left, because what they needed here wasn't here anymore.
And maybe when they destroyed it, it didn't have the blast radius, or maybe you still had to have it radiated to some point in order for it to have that chemical reaction. And then when they destroyed it, it just kind of leaked out. Just because we don't know what happens with it when it's exposed to different elements. What happens if water's added? What happens if it hits the ground and mixes with dirt, mud, blood, viscera, bone, whatever? We don't know what happens then. Maybe they needed it in its purest form, and its purest form was in beakers, tubes, chambers, whatever, and those broke. When those broke, that's it. And because Red Mercury doesn't seem like it's a radioactive source in its origin, that it has to be irradiated first, maybe it's the same as mercury. You just don't touch it. You don't want to get it on your hands. But other than that, it's basically harmless. You don't drink it like I think Newton drank it. Mercury, regular mercury. But maybe it's the same basic principle. Maybe it's already red mercury, and doing chemical reactions to it causes it to do whatever it does. Because if the jinn are seeking it and human beings can handle it, then that doesn't necessarily mean that it's radioactive. Because if that's the case, there'd be instances of biohazard suits, or not biohazard, radioactive suits and things like that. And there's not with those instances. So somewhere, some things got all sorts of crossed up. I don't know. It's been a very interesting episode. As always, we always have interesting episodes. And I want to thank everybody who listens. You guys are awesome. Shouts out to everybody who shows the show love on a daily basis. I appreciate each and every one of you. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Thank you for everything you guys do. And stay tuned for more good stuff from this Uncanny Earth. We're going to be doing a lot of cool stuff coming up. I'm going to be giving some shout outs to some good folks here. Probably next episode. I want to get a list of everybody and shout them out personally. If you haven't joined the Patreon yet, please do. Patreon.com/This Uncanny Earth. We have some good things coming up for that. We're going to be working on This Uncanny Earth After Dark. And that's going to deal with some pretty serious subject matter that will only be available to Patreon donors. It's going to be a lot of personal beliefs, opinions, things like that some stuff you guys are definitely going to want to tune in for and listen to because it's going to be good stuff. Anyways, guys, as always, why be boring when you could be uncanny? We will see you folks next week for our Egyptian love affair episode. You won't want to miss it. Peace.